conversation, understandable nonetheless. So my name is Luke Williams. I direct the Fischler Academy at NSU, and our program is focused really on teacher preparation, but also looking at career options and opportunities, in a broader sense for future educators as well. And so that also includes computer science education, which is developed as a double major in IT and education. So kind of plugging into the ed tech world. So really my lens within the context of this conversation is, through the, working with undergraduate students and kind of, as going to the theme of this, the navigating through the chaos. I think any teacher, educator, or folks working on the ground level, through the pandemic, and then obviously into this next phase of what undergraduate education looks like, we'll be able to relate to some of our experiences at NSU.
Oh, good. Just a little bit about myself. Many of you have known me for several years, and some of you don't know what my new research agenda has been since I've come back to the faculty line. So I'm Victoria Brown. So I have about 25 years experience in distance learning as a faculty member and leader of distance learning at a higher ed institution. And I've also, as part of my experiences, been working with some entrepreneurial companies and developing technology applications that to improve student outcomes within higher ed and K-12. So that's kind of the lens I'm coming from. This is the technology panel. So definitely we'll hopefully be able to share some of those experiences with you. So as we get started, let me pull up I've got notes from the person who was managing this particular panel. So let me kind of go back. And I think one of the, let's kind of to frame our discussion here, I think a lot of innovation has occurred through the pandemic. I think the pandemic actually zeroed in and focused on some of the weaknesses that we are having in the technology and the delivery of distance education. And with that, companies have really begun to innovate. They've begun to address some of those issues. Actually, I've noticed that Zoom is providing us a much better experience this year for our conference than it did last year. So could do, right? And really taking some of the products that we already had and adapting them and modifying them so they are more applicable and can be used in a higher ed or K-12 situation, where before it was kind of an afterthought. So we were using business applications and trying to adapt them to the educational situation. So also, we've seen post-COVID in the K-12 spaces, much better integration of technology within those classrooms. I'm seeing that where teachers had developed their videos, their how-tos, and doing all that work that they did through COVID. And now they're trying to figure out and navigate, how can I use this new, all these items that I produced? It took me so much time to do it. How can I use it? How can I enhance my classroom with that technology? So as a technology educator who teaches pre-service teachers how to use technology, it's very refreshing to be able to see that nice integration that's starting to occur in those spaces. And then of course in the higher ed, we're trying to figure out and navigate, how do we modify our curriculum and delivery systems to be more accommodating for some of these virtual and hybrid learning models that we've developed through the pandemic. And with students not always wanting to return, thinking it's also very convenient to be online, that And then again, faculty also thinking, oh, wow, it's really convenient. I can do all of my work online. It's kind of an interesting shift also that's occurring there. So I think where we're struggling right now is what is the long-term strategy? You know, what is the right combination of education and technology tools to best facilitate student learning at institutions? And and how can we make sure that we're meeting the needs of the students as we talked about in the last session? So from your perspective, uh, Luke, how do you see that shift from pandemic? And what is the biggest challenge that you're seeing right now?
Well, thank you. And definitely sets the tone for, obviously I know everybody here, especially if you're, at the university level can relate to some of these experiences where everything we offered a blend flex model on our campus, which was you could opt to do your courses, whether on campus or, at home. As you can imagine, I think students anticipated or thought, well, it's just easier to be in my dorm room. It's easier to be at home. Whether or not they were doing that for health reasons, in many cases not. It's just the path of least resistance, right? You don't have to get up and get yourself together as much, get down to class. Like there's some inconveniences that kind of come along with our daily commute that were sort of taken off the table. But within that, and we all saw this, some who just sort of abandoned any of the kind of formalities or things that, yes, I think generally speaking, people aren't thrilled or love having they kind of like to let their hair down and relax and not sort of come to any meeting with a sort of a professional attitude, but there's something lost in that process. And so what I've seen post, pandemic and looking at, okay, well, what do we do now? What does online learning look for us? We had to look at, and I spoke with our faculty teaching courses, what were some trends they were seeing? We're very much like the way that we do things is, constantly getting involved in these conversations about not just throw it into the suggestion box and hope things work out, but we really need to have these honest and open dialogues about what are you seeing in your classes? And if you're teaching an online course, what do we do to make this more meaningful for the students? I think it's important that we offer those. Our program is primarily face-to-face, but within that, people have, the notion of a college student who just has it easy and everything is taken care of in their life. I know maybe in some cases that's true, but in many cases for us and our student population, they have complicated lives. They may be the first in their family to go to college. They may be juggling one or two other things. They have a part-time job that's really helping to pay a lot of bills for them. Some are commuter students as well. And I'm sure you can relate to that. And so it's finding, all right, that balance of we do offer these online courses, but it's not a quote, easy course where you show up, you may or may not be able to turn on your camera. And I always tell our faculty, I try to make them feel as comfortable as possible with being empowered to say, look, as far as I'm concerned, if your camera's not on, you're not present in the class. Like, that's the way I view it. I know I couldn't imagine teaching a course from that point of view. It's sort of just speaking out to the void. And so when I taught courses that were online and had synchronous sessions, I need to see I need to see their beautiful faces smiling at me and engaging in these conversations and these things that we have developed over, countless years as a species that we really cannot take for granted. So I think what we're seeing now is that how do we continue building a technology that is as, yes, user friendly as possible, but also can kind of engage with those core elements of who we are, which are social beings. We need to see that smile or that sort of look of, surprise or be put into some of those situations. I know one of the things about Zoom that is very different than an in-person experience is silence feels more awkward on Zoom, at least in my experience. Like those moments of silence when you're in the same physical space, they're not as maybe intense, at least from my point of view, but silence on a Zoom session can very much feel like, okay, what's happening here? Like, is there anybody out there? So it's actually, what it's done is it's made me more interested in learning more about our biology and how the social elements of us as a species, because I think we all have that feeling when we go into a room, these chemicals are released in our brain that tell us this is good. Other humans here, like I'm safe, like, we may just make it. So how do we make an online experience get as close to that as possible? And we've been fortunate that we have faculty who are so creative, like you were saying earlier, what necessity being the mother of invention, and saying, okay, what do I do? How do I? My thing is in person. That's where I shine. How do I get as close to recreating that experience as possible? So I totally agree with you that Zoom, look, they a lot more Zoom users than there were 4 or 5 years ago. So with that, and I'm sure their stock price has gone up. So how much investment can they put into a product like Zoom to ensure that, they're able to continue building this product into something even more than what we see now? And who knows, look, maybe someday distance education, we really won't feel like that at all. We'll really know a lot of these people. And there are many people who I know strictly through Zoom sessions and conferences that I know very well. And when I see them in person, it doesn't feel as strange actually to talk with them and see them, face to face. Forgive me if I went on and on.
Well, I think Melanie has a great point that, do you want to share, Melanie?
Oh, which one? I just said we were humans first. I love
Yes.
that. Yes. But then Angela actually asked a great question, about that's always the debate with faculty, right? Do we make students have their camera on because I want to see you and see you engaged, and that you're not, I don't want to say playing solitaire. There's so many other games now that they can play during class. But is that part of the engagement, right? That we have a collaborative discussion, and that's how we learn and grow. There are many strategies that tell us that is very successful in student learning. Or do we just allow them to have the cameras off? Because Flo brought up a great point. There are students with limited technology, limited bandwidth. We still have a digital divide. Right. And does cameras on widen that gap that students are feeling? That's a great question.
Well, and one of the things, and I'm going to kind of come in from the K-12 perspective, because I did a lot of just talking with teachers during the K-12, trying to understand what their experiences were as teachers. And one of the things they found is that often the children may have been babysitting or taking care of other siblings, and so they didn't want the cameras on because all of the background noise that might have been going on in the home. You could actually hear families arguing, for example, through the cameras. Another teacher, I believe, shared with us our last conference where the parents were thinking about making sure their children were appropriately dressed. So there was just a whole slew of issues that occurred with the use of cameras, and all based on maybe social economic status and who was able to care for the kids, and maybe you didn't want people to know you were in your bedroom. There's a whole, so having that requirement of a camera actually became a barrier for those students. And I also think from what I've seen from, again, talking, I now live in a very rural area. So getting internet access through the mountains is not easy, okay? So there were, the best way they could adapt to distance learning was that parents had to drive to the school and pick up packets of work. And they had weekly appointments to go pick up their packet and to turn in the other one, because they didn't have internet access. Or if you do have it, it's spotty and it's not reliable. So I did see some legislation coming through that was looking at expanding our bandwidth across the United States. So I was very, very excited to see that that was part of the infrastructure bills that are coming through, because that is very limiting, and we have to find some, address some of those issues. So I think that's really valuable. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to say regarding, these kind of policies that we create when we teach online. I think this is what we were emphasizing, Animira and I, when yesterday when we were trying to marry culturally relevant pedagogy with universal design for learning. And the idea is that when you think about how you design your courses, what kind of interactions you create for your students, you have to look at through the lenses of diversity, belonging, equity, and inclusion. Because if you don't, then you create these rules or these practices that go against what you want. Like you want everyone to feel that they belong, but then you put these barriers, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why it's so important to have, there is a lot of intersection between UDL and culturally relevant pedagogy. So I think we can just need to use these frameworks combined, because that's going to benefit our students and us and our work.
Yes. I also think that some of the, and I'm going to kind of go back a little bit to the K-12 space. They didn't really have good solid tools, and they were put in a position of how, really adapting tools that were for grown-ups for little children. But I did see a rapid increase of applications. So maybe a one-directional type application like Kahoot, which had just been mainly an assessment tool, was all of a sudden trying to build in how do you design an online lesson and build an engagement into that lesson. I saw the same thing going on with Nearpod, another popular K-12 application. So I did see the industry really stepping up and increasing the bandwidth of what their products could do to really do a combination. And it's nice to see that that it didn't have to be all video, and that you could really build out a very good lesson for younger students using those tools. So I think that was a good innovation that occurred in the industry. And at the time, they were really great about letting you use those tools for free. But now you have to pay for them. So, but at least I saw that evolution occurring. And I do know that higher ed professors often use those tools as well. So they're starting to adopt that.
Yeah, no, Nearpod has been very helpful because of the fact that it's not simply expecting people to engage in a traditional sense of I talk, what are your thoughts? Not everybody is necessarily, that might not be everyone's strength, right? For some, they may be just kind of figuring out their point of view, and the way they process the information is different. So the flexibility and tools for something like Nearpod, I love. I think that they clearly tapped into something just before the pandemic. It's a pretty new company overall, but they really, I guess, being in the right place at the right time and really developing that product in a timely, way was critical, I think, to a lot of their success. And it's exciting to see some of those developments. as far as, you know, the options and opportunities, we offer face-to-face courses or online courses. If someone doesn't have a working camera, for example, on their computer, well, there's still a face-to-face course available. There's an opportunity available. I think what we found, and this was out like clear without any question, the vast majority, and students admit this when we talk to them. So everything from students cheating on exams in the K through 12 sector. I've actually been interviewing students for our newest cohort, and they're high school seniors, and they said that one of the hardest things is resisting the urge to cheat because so many of their peers were cheating on things. They weren't being held accountable for things. That if you tell the whole student body, and we did the experiment, and I think all the other universities did it as well, and said, hey, everyone did it a little different. Ours was blend flex, and so you can either come on campus or you can do online. Very few came on campus to go to class. And the ones who did were like, why am I here? Like, there's only like 5% of our normal group here. So you just fall into that, oh, it's easier to just sit in my dorm room and to not do it. Yes, there are outliers. There are students who are dealing with other, issues. They may be, like I said, they could be first in their family to go to college. They may have other financial hardships that they have to, deal with. Maybe having policies and things like that offer the opportunity to see some of those red flags and say, well, wait a second, if you have a computer, I don't know many of them now that don't have, you can go get a pretty cheap camera actually for almost nothing. It's very easy to access this technology and these tools now versus years ago where it was only, a select few could get their hands on some of these tools. I think the wide accessibility of a lot of these things. And then I know for the university, even the library offers will loan out tools and equipment and devices and things that are out there. So I think if you offer the path of least resistance, people will take it, generally speaking, knowing that it's probably not best for them, right? Like, we know that the donut is not the better choice than the broccoli, but we're human beings, we are flawed, and our desires usually for the avoidance of pain, and even if it means the long-term negative aspects of it. So I've had so many students talk to me about they felt like they missed out on a year, not just of their face-to-face prom and things that they had in high school, and they're trying to make the most out of their college experience now, but a lot of them, like, I don't feel like I learned anything. Like, I feel like I'm literally behind socially and academically, because these tools that were made to accommodate me basically gave me the option to not, be ready to go and like Melanie mentioned, and focused on what's happening. So yeah, I think it's not just a matter of, hey, your camera's not on, I'm failing you, like, forget about it. But it's, well, let me give you a call, let me send you the message, let's make this a thing that we can open up that door and find out, is there something going on? What because if they are multitasking and they're really not paying attention, then what's the point of even being there in general? So,
well, I think you brought up a couple of points that we should probably follow up on. And I think one of them is cheating. And I one of the things I felt through the pandemic is I was watching teachers and their adoption of technology. I did see an increased adoption of proctoring tools and monitoring and being aware of that cheating does occur. And I believe that many schools did purchase access to many of the different proctoring tools for testing. But at the same time, it also brings back the focus that maybe just proctoring the exam to prevent cheating is not adequate, and that we should be looking at better assessment strategies and to mitigate those efforts. And the newest type of technology is the chat BTG, I think it's called.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And where you just put in some great words and the paper pops out. So So, how are we going to deal with that as we move forward, and looking at, making sure we're designing instruction that is a little more foolproof than the simple click on the button and answer multiple choice question.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head earlier when you talked about the pandemic and sort of the forcing us to ask like bigger questions about, not only access to technology, but also in this instance, what are we actually asking them to do? And if you really cared about something, would you want to cheat on it? If maybe there's some people who would really care and have ownership over something and might still cheat anyway, but I bet it's a lot less. I would be willing to venture if there was more performance-based assessments or authentic assessments designed and developed, I know at the higher education level, and probably same thing, K through 12, then it's more, hey, you can't just fill in the blanks and do this multiple choice and the kind of, this obsession with standardization that we've experienced the last 20, almost 25 years at this point. All of that starts to, has bled into all of what the expectations are on the students, and was mentioned, they don't have ownership over that learning. That is checking a box. It's getting through whatever that is. So I do think it once again shines a light on some of those issues. If they're all cheating, then that means they don't really necessarily care or feel a connection to their learning. And if they're not feeling a connection to their learning, what are we doing? What's the point? So yeah, I think once again, technology and going into the chat, I was watching the sequel to Black Panther last night with my wife, and that movie has some really cool technology. Anybody who's seen it, there's a lot of AI going on. And then it got me thinking as I was watching the movie about this, chat, this AI, and we tend to just immediately go to fear with something we don't know. And I'm thinking just all these times in human history where it's like, oh man, Y2K, what's going to happen? Like, there's always something new for us to panic about, it seems. But in watching that movie, seeing some of the sort of applications of like, what could AI look like? And could we get away from some of the mundane or teaching this most simplistic things like memorizing facts, and get away from that with our students, where maybe AI can help with that, but then you as the creative being and innovative, human, are able to use that truly as a tool to, build something greater. So I'm not necessarily scared of it. What I think the people who should be scared of it are those who aren't developing assessments that are authentic and real. Yes, Wakanda forever, for sure.
Yes. Well, I thank you, Amanda, for giving me the actual acronym, the GPT. At the same time, with all this concern going around about, how are we going to prevent students from having their papers written automatically, I also saw faculty members immediately starting to innovate in how can we use this tool to help us with the writing of our syllabi and, different tasks that we need to do. So I thought it was kind of a dichotomy. And then that brought me back to the calculator, because remember way back when we were first introducing the calculator to the classroom, it was like the students aren't going to learn math and they're not going to memorize how to do things. And could this chat GPT become a tool that we're in the next few years we're going to say, oh well, this is what it's doing, and and we can do this now. So it's going to be kind of interesting, I think, to watch that one as it evolves.
I think with the group of teacher educators here and at this conference, like, who are the people who are going to make this into something great? Like, it's the collective of educators who are working with future educators and people who maybe have connections with these tech companies, and it's really up to the people who understand and get pedagogy to step up and be vocal about, hey, it's not all doom and gloom, everybody. Like, like you said, the innovation is already starting. So we can spend our time, effort, and energy panicking about it, or we can say, all right, how do we use this thing, and what can we do something really cool with this? Now, look, we may be some years away from the Wakanda Forever tech. I'm fingers crossed. I would love to be able to walk around with a watch that is at that level of capabilities, but I still think it's exciting, and there's a way to, we can always reframe this and say, all right, this is exciting. Let's see, what can we build this into?
Well, along those lines, since we've already started in that direction, so let me kind of see, I would like to have your thoughts about where do you think the most interesting trends are going to be for 2022, 2023, 2024?
Well, I don't know if Amanda wanted to say something. Amanda, did you want to say something?
I missed
No,
some.
other than we're looking at ChatGPT-3 and how it can be used to as like a starting point for assignments, because it doesn't give the depth or even the breadth in some cases that faculty members would expect of their students, to the level at which they expect their students to perform. It has some benefits. So yes, I love Vicky's question and prompt. I'm backtracking. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what Vicky's question.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point. As someone who taught writing, in English education as my background, one of the biggest obstacles for my middle schoolers was like, how do I get started? Like, how do I get the ball rolling on this? So to have a tool that can help get the ball rolling, and then you start to build in some more of that creative, authentic, real, this is me, my point of view, my perspective, I think it could be very helpful. For sure. I think going back to Vicky's question, the biggest trends in technology within the education sector, I think AI, it's very clear that it's probably progressing. For those who aren't plugged in and watching and seeing what's happening with I've noticed a lot of the really smart tech people, we're all in our own bubble, but they're very much like they have their own very specific language that other people don't usually have access to. So I'm in some different Reddit groups, and I like to pop in and see like what are these new articles, what's coming out, what do the people who do this for a living think about this, because I know this will impact education and educators. So I see AI being a huge part of integrating in, and I think about my wife who teaches at the middle school level, and I'm thinking there's some certain things that she does that are simply just volume and time consuming. They're not as much of the authentic feedback that really is what drives student success and relationship building. Can we use AI to get rid of all that time that she's putting into some of this very mundane stuff? And she focused that energy on personal relationship building. So I see, once those companies and the ed tech companies really start to get that picture of like, if teachers see something that's AI related, that's very, very reliable and useful, they're going to jump all over it. They're going to be begging their principals. People will be investing in those things. So I think, being an educator in the United States, and in our country being a capitalist country, that the trends will go where the money goes, and the money will go where I think in some cases there are efficiencies built in, or perhaps if it's a competitive, let's say, venue where people are wanting to go to a certain university or a school or what have you, that may be more along the lines of the augmented reality and virtual reality realm, some of those more that equipment. But I've seen some incredible developments with VR. I mean, it really was not affordable 10 years ago. It was absurd to think that you'd have it. And now we've got, in our own space here in the library at NSU, our students can go in, plug into their Oculus Quests, and really do some remarkable things. And so we're really challenging them to think of ways that they can integrate some of that into their classrooms and learn how to do things like grant writing. They don't need a whole class set of those VR headsets to get the experience, but with that price going down from, it used to be thousands of dollars to now cheaper than getting a PlayStation and an Xbox, much cheaper in some cases. You know, it would be nice to see more and more classrooms getting those, so that students can engage in some of those really, you know, we talked about presence and using tech to build a sense of presence. A really good VR experience, any of you who've used them before know that it can transport you, you know, to the Battle of Berlin, for example, which was just this wild VR experience that I had where I'm in my office testing these things out. And I'm like, I take my headset off and I was like, that was intense. You know, it had the sound of the radio of the guy from the BBC who was in the fighter plane flying in to the Battle of Berlin and seeing this in 360 with other pilots on board and seeing the fire coming up from the ground, and then learning later on that there was a strategy. Malcolm Gladwell put out a book where he talked about the Bomber Mafia, which is a group from, I think, the University of Alabama that were really huge in helping develop strategy to win that battle. And so really, I feel like things like VR, as well as, you know, artificial intelligence in all its forms are really going to help make these experiences more meaningful for students and for educators.
Well, I am personally glad that you brought up the 3D stuff, because I think that it's been slow to evolve. And I think right now the biggest drawback is content, in getting to making sure there's enough content out there for people to use. So it's a little, still, I think, a little expensive on the development side of the VR stuff. Well, I want to thank everyone who's here. It's been a great session. Thank you, Luke, for just stepping right up and helping us out here. And hopefully, I really would love for people to come in and join me, and after you grab a little bite to eat, new diet soda or coffee or whatever it is you need. To get through the rest of the afternoon. So hopefully I'll see you in a few minutes.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
Mm-hmm.